Pittsburgh Steeler fans, it is time once again for another edition of the Curtain Call podcast. My name is Michael Beck, Deputy Editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, and I'm not joined as always by Geoffrey Benedict, who is gone AWOL. Tonight, we have the substitute, Brian Anthony Davis, the podcast producer with us at Behind the Steel Curtain. Brian, how are you?
I'm glad to come out of the bullpen to the big show. This is a marquee show for us now, so I love being on here, and I love talking to guests.
Oh, and speaking of guests, we got a great one tonight talking Notre Dame football from 1 foot down, Josh Vowles. Josh, how are you doing, sir?
Oh, I'm doing great. I'm just glad to be a part of a podcast where I don't have to spend the next hour and a half, 2 hours afterwards editing and and publishing it. So I'm all forward to sitting down and talking some ball.
Oh, that's what I'll be doing.
Yeah.
I guess so. We can really kind of dive into some of the prospects here. I know what the Steelers needs, especially at that tackle spot. One of the guys that you see kind of mock draft to this team quite often is Liam Eichenberg, the big left tackle at Notre Dame. And I'm just curious, Josh, if you can break down some of his biggest strengths and some of his weaknesses as well, and potentially why he's kind of viewed as a day two pick.
Yeah, well, strengths, is strength. I think Liam Eichenberg is about as big as powerful as a tackle that you'll find. I found it real curious that someone had his weakness as that he needs to get stronger. Dude's massive. I've seen the dude just move people around. And then the toughness factor with him is there. I mean, go back to the Florida State game where they tried gouging his eyeball out. And he comes out, he can't even see. So he can't see out of his left eye, and he's the left tackle. And he comes out, and it's like completely shut. And it's all black and blue. And he finishes that game off, and he does it, with, I don't say with ease, but did it tremendously. But he's pretty light on his feet for a big guy. I mean, he looks, he's probably more of a right tackle in the league. I think for sure. He's not like a Ronnie Stanley, but he definitely moves really well. Leadership is there. He's pretty mature. He's got his stuff together, but I mean, he's a mean guy on the field. I mean, he is kind of a throwback. If you look at the offensive linemen coming out of Notre Dame in the last, 6, 7, 8 years, there's been a certain style and a certain attitude about them, the way they go about their business. And that all goes back with Harry Heastan when he really got Notre Dame's line churning. He's cut from the same mold. So there's a lot there. He can play. If he had to play a left tackle, he certainly can. I think, like I said, I still think he's probably more of a right tackle, but he could play guard if you needed him inside. I mean, I think he's pretty, diverse there.
Right. Now, Brian, how big of a need is it for the Steelers to take a tackle in these early rounds?
I'm thinking anywhere in the top 3 is where the Steelers definitely need to go here, Michael. And the reason being is they need to address it. We were talking off mic how I've been really diving into the mock draft simulators, and there's a lot in the first 2 rounds, but after that, they seem to dry up real quick. And Eichenberger is one of those guys that I am really intrigued with, but he seems to be down the list, and I don't understand why he's down the list compared to some of these other players. What would you say, Josh, is the reason that he is not listed in the top 2 or 3?
Well, I was talking about this with Michael before we recorded here. I don't know. It confuses the hell out of me. Notre Dame's offensive linemen over the years have done really well in the league. And even guys like Alex Bars and Sam Mustipher, who went undrafted, end up becoming starters in the league. And so there's kind of this thing with Notre Dame's left tackles is, getting drafted in the first round. I mean, you go back, a guy like Zach Martin, who ends up becoming, an all-pro left guard. Ronnie Stanley, these guys, this is all the same kind of system, the same kind of mold here. There's not much difference when you go and you look at, how these guys have played at Notre Dame. And so I have been confused since day one when you're consensus All-American, all ACC, you won the ACC blocking. We're new to this whole conference thing this year. So all these conference awards that we used to make fun of, we're like, yeah, he's all ACC. But I don't understand how he fell behind a few other names in this. I certainly think the time of COVID has changed some things. I would have liked to have seen, like a regular combine. But I think once people start to see him in that combine setting, I think March 31st would be Notre Dame's pro day when they're doing their virtual combine kind of stuff. I think once you see, his bench numbers, see him move, seeing that this big guy who I think, like I keep saying, maybe he's a natural right tackle, could be a really good left tackle at the next level. And I really don't understand how some of these other guys are rated ahead of him, other than, a scout falls in love with a guy and then the kind of snowballs from there.
Awesome. Now, we do have a super chat that I want to get to before we keep going on here from Double H, who puts $20 in the tip jar. So thank you so much for that, Double H. He says, Michael and Geoffrey Spirit, thank you for keeping the fire stoked in the off season. Hey, it's our pleasure. And if you have a question for any of us, Double H, make sure to get it in the live chat, and we will bring it up. So thank you so much for that. Now, Josh, getting back to the offensive line talk, the Fighting Irish have a ton of guys coming out this year, really. And I'm curious if you can rank really kind of the four that I kind of see kind of making that jump. Liam Eichenberg, Aaron Banks, Robert Hainsley, and Tommy Kramer.
Yeah, I would probably actually rank them in that direct order. I love Aaron Banks, and I was very hopeful that Aaron Banks is coming back for another year at Notre Dame. There was talk about him moving from left guard to kick out to left tackle for one season, but he had an All-American season himself, and chose this time to go to the league. Can't blame him there. But I love him. He's big, can move. He did have a foot injury earlier in his career that kind of held him back. And when you're that big, a foot injury is a major kind of a deal. But I like Banks a lot. I think the ceiling might be the highest with Aaron Banks. Robert Hainsey, and you had mentioned something about I thought you said something about needing a center. Hainsey is extremely diverse. He started at Notre Dame since his freshman year in 2017 at right tackle. He did like a kind of a rotation kind of a deal his freshman year. I mean, he's out there against Georgia, and 2017 Georgia's defense was incredible. I mean, they were monsters. And then you had this freshman out there, and he held his own. But I think he played some center during the Senior Bowl. He's really diverse. His biggest knock, Hainsey's knock, is his arms aren't as long as what you'd like. But that was the same. Same can be said about Zach Martin, was another guy whose arms weren't so long, and then he goes and becomes an all-pro guard. Nick Martin was another one, the same thing, and he's done well at center. So I like Hainsey a lot. Of the four, he's probably the has the best leadership characteristics of them all. He really was probably the main leader along the offensive line. And then Tommy Kramer, I'm an Ohio boy. Liam Eichenberg has always been special in my heart because of Ohio, but with Kramer from Cincinnati, a little bit the same thing. A lot of expectations coming in, and he played right away, but he never got to the level that you would hope from a guy who was rated a 5-star from some sites, but yet has been steady, has improved the entire time, has never dipped down. He's only gotten better, but just never reached that level. Can he do it in the league? Absolutely. I mean, we've seen these guys from Notre Dame do this before, and I don't know, but in that order, probably in particular, Eichenberg, Banks, Hainsey, and Kramer.
Awesome. Now, Brian, of course, the Steelers could really use basically an offensive lineman damn near at every position across that 5-man front. Is there one spot you think the Steelers could probably stray away from and potentially push adding players in and push that kind of further down the line, be it guard, center, tackle?
I'm actually going to say guard right now. And the only reason I'm going to say that is I think David DeCastro still has plenty of time left. He had one bad season, and it really wasn't. I mean, it was still a Pro Bowl season. It was not the kind of season that everybody expects out of David DeCastro, but I don't think he's done just yet. But there's a lot of us in Steeler Nation that we see a subpar year, which he was hurt. So I don't even think it was subpar. The guy was hurt a lot of the season. He came in, he played admirably, but then you get a guy like Kevin Dotson on the other side of the ball, and he's a superstar in the making. A lot of people are excited about that. So I would say guard is probably where I'm going to shy away from here. But if you mentioned a player like Hainsey that could also play guard. So I think the Steelers are probably going to look at, in this situation, the draft, that guard center combo. And that's worked out for them before, because if you remember, in 1988, the Steelers drafted a guard in the second round out of Kentucky by the name of Dermontti Dawson. The next year in the third round, they got a Golden Domer by the name of Chuck Lanza, if you remember Chuck Lanza. Josh, do you remember Chuck?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
they
vaguely, but yes.
they brought in Chuck to be the future center of the team, but that wasn't working out. They saw what they could do with Dermontti Dawson. They moved him over. So it's nice to have that versatility with guard and center. And you mentioned short arms. Well, the Steelers have that situation right now. That's been the knock on B.J. Finney for since he went undrafted out of Kansas State. But B.J. is right now, he is going to be the starter until he's displaced at this point. And that is probably, it looks like what the team's trying to do is bring that center in maybe the first 4 rounds and give him a redshirt year behind Finney. That's what I'm gathering. But really, tackle right now is probably a little bit more important, even though you do have some starters in there. They're young and unproven because of Zach Banner. Chukwuekwuemeka Force, so they're probably looking for the future down the line, especially with not believing that Alejandro Villanueva is coming back. So I think right now tackle is probably where they're going to go first. They want to address center, but I think with some of the guys that you mentioned, Hainsey, there's a guy in Georgia, Trey Hill. They could Miners. They could wait until the 3rd or 4th round possibly for their future center. They need to strike quicker on an offensive tackle.
Awesome. Thanks, Bad, for that. Now, moving slightly out, Josh, to that tight end spot. The Steelers are kind of in need of a tight end, too, and I think this is another spot they could dive into the Notre Dame well. Tommy Tremble is someone that is renowned for his blocking, and I think a lot of Steelers fans know that name specifically because he can play that role. Can he also be successful at the next level as a pass catcher?
I really do think so. And look, before this season happened, Tommy Tremble was known as like he was going to be the guy as more of like an H-back, but like throw him in the slot a little bit, split him out, and you do that with this is when. If people aren't familiar with Tommy Tremble, he's not the blocking tight end that is you're imagining in your head. This is a guy they used as he basically played fullback most of the season, which I absolutely adored. And he he stole all our hearts. But the guy's he was a straight mauler and played every down like it was his last. But he does have a little bit of issue with his hands, but he is extremely athletic, runs really well. And I mean, I see a little bit of issue with his hands, but there wasn't a whole lot of times where you see, there's a couple of drops I remember distinctly, but other than that, I mean, he moves really well, runs good routes. So he's a guy that's very diverse, but he's not a prototypical blocking tight end that you would normally think of. Brock Wright, actually, who will be in this draft from Notre Dame, is more along those lines.
Gotcha. Now, Brian, of course, with today's news of Eric Ebron restructuring his deal, freeing up a little bit of money, there's also some rumblings from some eagle-eyed Steeler fans that saw Jesse James changing all his social media pictures to him in his Steelers gear again, and that's kind of the telegraph move for the Steelers offseason. Do you kind of foresee them going the free agent route with that tight end 2 spot, or could someone like Tommy Tremble end up being the pick and the guy that the Steelers roll with in that number 2 slot at tight end?
And I think that was you, Michael, that did all the photoshopping on that, because I know you've been that guy. You have something for ex-Lions right now because you were going after Gerard Davis. You love those
Big
Detroit
money.
Lions for some reason. You know what? This deal for Ebron from what Dave Schofield, who's one of our capologists, our co-editor of BTSC, one of the things that he looked at was the fact that this might be the trend starting with avoidable years. And that's what he can gather right now is going on with the Ebron contract. And if you go ahead and check out the Stat Geek tomorrow morning on the podcast only platform, on the audio side, he's going to dive more into that. So Ebron is back maybe for 1 or 2 years, probably one. I think they're looking to draft that future tight end.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of one of the ways they go about it as well. But Notre Dame does have a second tight end there in Brock Wright. I'm curious, Josh, if you think he's someone that could make a similar type of impact, or how he could kind of move on to the second level.
Well, there's not I really don't have a whole lot of opinions about Brock Wright. I mean, to be honest with you, Notre Dame he was used mainly as, so we used Tommy Tremble as like that fullback H-back role in 2020, and he just like exploded and did great. Brock Wright actually held that role the year prior, and he did well, but it wasn't something that like stood out as like, oh my god. But I mean, honestly, Brock Wright reminds me a lot of Durham Smythe, who was drafted late a couple of drafts ago by the Miami Dolphins. There's a lot of that in there. The kid can play. Tall kid, really strong. I know Deion Sanders thought the world of this kid when he was coming out of high school. I mean, really talked him up. Just have some coaching him a little bit. But I mean, he can be a guy. He's got, there's a lot of potential there. Just at Notre Dame, tight end's a little different kind of a world. It's tight end U. They really had an out of this world freshman come in that took a lot of snaps. I mean, and if you watch Michael Mayer play at Notre Dame, you realize how special this kid's going to end up being. I hated the nickname Baby Gronk they gave him, but it's a ridiculous nickname. Just come up with something else. But you start to take some snaps away. So a veteran like Wright, who some people thought he might have he was going to transfer for the season, and some people thought maybe he's going to come back for another year, get some more film under him. But he's going to head to the NFL and see what happens. I think he ends up catching on somewhere and doing quite well because it's all there for him. It's just it never got fully used in South Bend.
Now, to flip over the defensive side really quick, is Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah the top Notre Dame prospect of this class?
Yeah, absolutely. And he is – there's something extremely special about Woo. And I got to tell you, if he can get to Pittsburgh with the black and yellow and the nickname like Woo, he has got a marketing scheme ready to go. No, he really is something special. And Pete Sampson with The Athletic did a story about him, because you look at just his numbers, right? Like 215, 220 pounds, and he looks slight of frame, but then watch him out in the field, and he's straight up killing guys. The power that he puts through, and speaking of of Notre Dame nerds, someone actually did an actual equation formula that shows you what kind of power that Woo puts through when he hits somebody. But he's incredible. I mean, his coverage skills, covering inside the slot. I know PFF was, had him ranked as the highest or second highest, something like that, as far as defending against the pass from the slot. He really is that next generation kind of linebacker, and he proved it for the last 2 years in Notre Dame. I mean, 2019, he really struggled right out of the gate. I remember a Labor Day night down in Louisville, and we're kind of looking at each other in the press box a little bit because the linebackers really had themselves a terrible first half, and then they just got to go off. And you saw Woo just keep getting better and better throughout the year, and by the end of 2019, you're like, all right, this is an All-American type linebacker. And then 2020 comes along, and you saw every single game. There was no let off what he did, and it covered everything. I mean, what he did against the run, but I mean, especially against the pass. And then in today's NFL, that's more important than your 235, 240 pound linebacker in the middle, who's, going extinct anyways. So yeah, he is the real deal. He is something special. And he is the future of what goes on at linebacker.
And with you saying that as well, I'm curious your thoughts if there's any worry that you think some team might see his slight frame and think, oh, this guy's more of a strong safety. Does that worry you at all that some stubborn NFL head tries to move him back?
I mean, that'd be their problem if they did. I think if anyone's trying to line up to do something like that, that's their problem. We recruited Wu as a safety. Notre Dame started recruiting safeties and then get him into the way. They kind of moved him up into linebacker, and you get you more speed that way. They do things a little bit differently now, but someone could say that if someone tried to do that, they'd just be losing their job in a few years because it's a totally wrong way to go about it. But just watch his tape. I mean, if you watch his tape and watch what he does, it's not like Notre Dame's playing MAC schools, week in and week out. You're playing real competition, and you watch what he does against other big boys and what he brings. I really don't think there should be too many doubts, too many issues about that.
It is musical chairs tonight. Brian Anthony Davis falls out. Geoffrey Benedict pops up. Geoffrey, you were late, but how are you doing? How are you doing, man?
I am so sorry. That was things were crazy. Things were crazy, and I'm here now. So
it's okay. Stuff happens. It is what it is. We're having fun talking Notre Dame prospects. Josh, I'm going to throw another question at you while we let Geoffrey catch his bearings here. Now, kind of moving forward to those that defensive line. I know Dalen Hayes and I'm going to butcher this one. Adetokunbo Ogun Deji.
It's Adetokunbo, which his mother appreciates. Everyone, we shortened it. You shortened it down to Ade, but I know his mother appreciates him being called Adetokunbo. Okay, and then the last name is pronounced Ogundeji.
Ogundeji. Okay, if he ends up being a Steeler, I'll make sure to get that right. Are both those guys more pure defensive ends, or could either of them play kind of an edge outside linebacker type role?
Well, I mean, in Notre Dame's system, Dalen Hayes in particular, they changed the name of it a few times. Whether it be a shark or a viper, it's a drop line. It's a drop end. So a lot of times Notre Dame when they would blitz one of their safeties or their corners, you'd send out that drop end out into coverage. Julian Aquara was one that Julian and Dalen played in a rotation back in 19. So he has played standing up and does play out there a little bit. I don't think his future is quite there. If you wanted to use him as a linebacker, I think you'd probably be wrong. But he does a really good job he's pretty athletic, so he can do a lot of those things. So if you need him to do it, so if your system involves, a little bit more of a hybrid role here and there, he's the guy that could definitely get that kind of stuff done. And does have some experience doing it. And Ogundeji was used more as a strong side, but really, and we've slid him before over into a D tackle on occasion and need it. He's extremely powerful player. So sliding him down inside a little bit more was never much of a problem. But from the outside, as a pass rusher, was really his main strength.
Perfect. Now, Geoffrey, as we're kind of approaching that 30-minute mark here, I'm curious just your kind of top questions that you might want to throw at Josh for these Notre Dame prospects.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on Tommy Tremble, the tight end? I don't know if you guys have covered him yet.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, we did. I love the kid. I think there is a lot. I think you could, depending upon the offensive system that he gets involved with, there's a lot to do. There's a lot you can go with him. Because he is athletic. His pass catching skills really weren't put on display. And like I was saying earlier, a lot of that had to do with this year having a freshman phenom come in that you could use more in that role. And we used him a lot as fullback. but he's athletic enough to use pretty much how you see fit at tight end. And he's got good speed. The one thing, one of the things that a weakness of his is he's not as tall as some tight ends. He's probably an inch or two, but I always kind of laugh at that, like the short arm comment, with linemen. Well, if a guy can play, a guy can play. So if there's an inch short here or there, it shouldn't make much of a difference. But I think he can be used in a lot of different ways in an offense. And just depending on what that is. If you use him right, he's perfect. If not, if you try to make him something that he's not, which is, like a full-time inline tight end, I don't think that would be the correct usage.
Well, see, I like him a lot because I don't know if you're familiar with Matt Canada and his different teams he's been on, but he fits the mold of that H-back, in motion, interior blocking from H-back, like interior passing, doing those little shovel passes, he seems almost like the perfect fit for that kind of a system. And with the Steelers not having a second tight end right now, he is a guy that I really like watching his film. I'm just like, oh man. Oh,
that'd be a good. And we, from the college football world, Matt Canada know him pretty well throughout the years and what he does. A system like that for sure. That's a good fit for Tommy Tremble.
And the guy throwing him the ball a little, I guess, was lined up in front of him more so. But Ian Book is someone that we haven't talked about yet. And I know a lot of Steelers fans are starting to clamor for kind of some quarterback depth, maybe start looking towards the future. And I know his name's kind of getting tossed around a little bit. I think I saw somewhere he ran a 40 time that's off the charts. Is he really kind of transitions to an NFL quarterback, or is he someone that might have to switch it up to even stay in that caliber of a league?
I wouldn't count out Ian Book on anything. This was a guy who was a 3-star commit, like in the 800s, to Washington State, and then he was the absolute like kind of a backup plan, extra guy coming in for Notre Dame, and then all of a sudden finds himself, from his freshman year on, just kind of moving up. Then all of a sudden he's the winningest quarterback in Notre Dame history, and that half the fan base didn't like because he wasn't your prototypical 6'4" with a cannon arm.
Not
all
Joe Montana.
All Ian Book did was win. There are some definite weaknesses with him. And arm strength is one. How far can he really throw? But the kid's got moxie. I mean, he really knows. He loves the game, and he just kind of a playmaker out there on the field. I don't know what he's going to do in the NFL. I think that's one of the fun things about this is we're going to see. How he could be a guy that's in the league for 8 or 9 years. Could be a journeyman guy. I'm not sure if I ever see him as being like the man somewhere for 5 or 6 years, but he's proven everybody wrong throughout, pretty much since he left high school. So why stop now? But there's a lot to like there. He's a natural born leader. Guys love playing for him. And smart. There wasn't a whole lot of bad decisions from him. I mean, quarterback's going to throw a crap pick here and there. And if you want to pile everything that he does on like 1 or 2 interceptions in his career, so be it. That's your problem. But I mean, he does. He's done a great job. He's one of the greatest that Notre Dame's had. And I'll fight anybody that wants to say otherwise. I mean, all the kid does is win. What else is he supposed to do? But he's accurate. He is, he plays that short to mid game, but he is, I don't want to say deceptively fast, but I mean, he can move. I mean, it was his running ability. In fact, in 2019, I believe he was Notre Dame's second leading rusher. There's especially in that second half of the season, we had kind of a rough time in the rain in Ann Arbor. It sucked really bad. But after that, Ian Book basically just took the team on his shoulders and was just willing themselves to win out the rest of that season. And they were blowing teams out, but they had a rough time against like Virginia Tech. That first game after a tough loss, rough game, nothing went up, but he just kept going. And it was with his feet that he was doing things with. So he's got that in him. You want to call that moxie or, whatever. He has all that stuff. So again, he's a guy, right fit, right place, right time, that can really give somebody some quality, be a quality player for somebody.
Great, Geoffrey. I'll give you the last question for Josh here. While we're pressing with time.
Okay. Is there anyone that you think has really slipped under the radar that you look at Notre Dame and say, you know what, maybe they won't be a star in the NFL, but this is going to be someone who is someone you want on your team?
Yeah, I mentioned before we started recording just a little bit. It's Nick McLeod, cornerback. He was a transfer in from NC State. Played just this 1 year for Notre Dame. Was really hoping we get another year out of him, but he was Notre Dame's best corner, and he really had a really solid season. Does well in coverage. He's more of a he is definitely more of a boundary corner than a field corner, but does his job well. And he's a guy that didn't get one of those virtual invites or however that's working for the combine, which kind of surprised me a little bit because I thought he did a heck of a job. So he'd be kind of the surprise kind of a guy. Other than that, I think there's too many shockers there. Other than I think again, Aaron Banks probably has. I think he has a higher ceiling than anybody else on the offensive line for Notre Dame coming out this year. He's again a guy you could put anyway. I think he even did some center. Or we put him at center for maybe like a fall or a spring or something to see what we had, and I don't remember hearing anything bad about it. So yeah, Nick McLeod is a guy I think can and probably should be drafted. Maybe those late rounds, but I think he's a guy that gives you a lot of value at the end of those rounds. And then Aaron Banks, I just think he's going to go to somebody in the late second or third round, and he's going to be a starter for the next 8-9 years, decade or whatever.
Yeah, looking at his film, he reminds me a little bit of Kevin Dotson, who the Steelers got in the fourth round, and he's going to be a starter for us for a long time.
Yeah, and I think I was saying this, Green Bay, Pittsburgh, these are franchises that's what they do best. Is the third, fourth round guys that end up just putting a restaurant in the city when they're done because they've been spent their entire career there. So,
yep.
Awesome. Josh, thank you so much for your time with us tonight.
Absolutely.
Is there anything you want to plug on your way out?
Sure. Just, we're having a good time over at onefootdown.com. And you can always enjoy the OFD podcast. I laugh at these half-hour marks that you're talking about when we are ripping off 2.5 hour to 3 hour epic episodes each week. Which is usually because we get way off topic on some things. But if you're a Notre Dame fan or just a college football fan, which especially on the podcast, we definitely dive all over the place when it comes to college football. You can check us out over there. We're all, iTunes, Spotify, the whole deal. Other than that, just I'm excited to see Pro Day here. Was in a week now, just to see what kind of numbers these guys put out. And just start getting it straight here. That like Liam Eichenberg is a first round offensive tackle. I'm hoping Pro Day kind of sets this straight a little bit because it has been confusing as all to be about how he's viewed as a second round guy as opposed to your normal Notre Dame first round offensive tackle.
Terrific. Now I guess Geoffrey and I will trudge on for another 30 minutes to get through some Steelers news of the day, some Notre Dame related news as well. But Josh, once again, thank you so much for joining us once again from 1 Foot Down. Thanks again.
Yep. Thank you, guys.
Terrific. So if you're listening on the podcast side right now, click over to part 2. If you're on YouTube and or on Facebook currently, just hang tight. In a couple seconds, we will be right back with the second part of our show. And we are back with the second part of our podcast. Josh is still sitting here, but he just clicked off. Never mind. that was a fake out. Anyway, you're listening to the Curtain Call podcast. My name is Michael Beck, joined, as always, by Mr. Geoffrey Benedict, who was a touch late for class tonight. And I think it's only fair if you give the people your best Maxime Talbot superstar impression.
Did you actually look that up?
Of course I did.
Check it out.
And all is forgiven. That's all I needed to put a smile back on this face. Geoffrey, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good now that I'm here. I'm doing much better now.
Perfect. Now, talking Notre Dame today. Of course, there is some big news of a former Notre Dame wide receiver jersey up on the wall behind me there. What are your thoughts on kicking people while they're down on the ground in a bar fight?
It's a bar fight. Like, it wasn't that long ago we were worried about people getting like stabbed in a bar while Mike Pouncey and Marquise Pouncey were there. Like, no one died.
Yeah. That's
number one. No one is in jail. No one is like stabbed anybody. Nobody got shot. I don't know. Someone gets kicked when they're down in a bar fight. I really don't care. Like, that's me. I'm like, well, yeah, you shouldn't have been in a bar fight. That's stupid. Yeah, Chase Claypool did something stupid. He was in a bar fight. Stupid. But I mean, it's not nearly on the level of the stuff Todd Haley used to do.
I was just about to mention Todd Haley. I was just about to say, if only he was still the offensive coordinator and they're trying to give him some crap for his action. Just be like, I just saw our OC just like completely hammered down at Cowboys. Like,
no, I was kicking Todd Haley, trying to get him off that person. Like, Todd, stop it!
Stop it! Like,
stop biting that person in the face.
At least he's not biting kneecaps over in Detroit.
Yeah, seriously.
But, oh, goodness gracious! Yeah,
I don't get it. Like, people have fights. Fights are dumb. They're dirty. They're like, he wasn't in a box. Like, I don't know why we care. I honestly don't know why we care. They broke it up. The lady who was recording it's yelling at it, "You grow up, you're a bunch of idiots." Like, some people, I'm like, yeah, there you go. That's about we're good now. We're pretty good.
Yeah.
I don't get the problem with it. I think we as a culture like to be upset by things and be shocked by them. But no one who goes to clubs like that is surprised when someone ends up on the ground getting kicked. No one.
Yeah. It's the world we live in with smartphones, I suppose. You got to be on your best behavior at all times. And that's something pro athletes just got to deal with. So it's unfortunate, but you know what? Despite there not being ice on the ground, I guess we learned that you don't mess with Canadians. We're going to kick you in the ass, and we're going to kick you while you're down.
We'll kick you in the face. Nicely. Be like, oh, sorry, did that hurt? Did you again?
Oh, we have fun. We have a lot.
I'll give the caveat. If we find out there's more to it, okay. We don't know if there's anything to this. If it's just stupidity at a bar, that's what happens at night at a bar. People are stupid. It happens. So as long as there's nothing more to it, I really don't have a problem.
And despite the speculation in the live chat, I was not at that California bar backing him up. That fake news. I was not there.
Oh, wait, was he in California?
I believe it was.
That's worse to me. What are you doing in California?
Well, I think he's training with TJ Husmanzada and his group.
Oh, this is like 2 strikes now. Okay, never mind. This is a big deal.
He's been working out with him since he's been playing at Notre Dame, so I can. That's why he didn't break 1,000 yards this past year. So.
Yeah, that's why. Just make sure he was kicking someone and not stepping on a terrible towel. That's what I want to do. Check the film. Make sure he wasn't wiping his foot with the terrible towel or something like that. Hushmanzada.
Anyway, Steelers stuff. There's been a lot of it. Steven Nelson mostly is some of the big news of the past couple days here. And all of a sudden, the Steelers' strength of one of their more strong position groups at corners kind of being decimated by free agency, by cuts. What do you have to make about this group and that release in general?
Okay, on the release, I just did. My film room came out today. I actually rushed to put it out last night so that it would get it done last night so it could come out today on the second day with all the, right after all the news dropped of him getting cut. But really, I did a 2-part film room on Cameron Sutton. I did one on him at nickel when he filled in this year, a couple weeks in a row for Mike Hilton in the middle of the season. He's such a different player than Mike Hilton that the defense, he didn't really fit. And they tried to manufacture ways for him to work around Mike Hilton's role because that's not him. He's not that dude. It'd be like Vince Williams and Devin Bush, totally different linebackers. You can be I shouldn't say that difference because there's a difference in quality there that is bigger than with Sutton and Hilton, but it's just such different styles that they don't fit. And he didn't fit there. And then today's film room, I talk about him and Nelson, and he fits that role. Cameron Sutton fits the role that they play Steven Nelson in. He isn't quite at Steven Nelson's level in a few areas, but really, once they signed Cameron Sutton and Steven Nelson, they started talking about, saying he could get a trade. My initial thought was, okay, they didn't want to keep Nelson past this year because they've got Sutton. They've got Sutton, and they were planning on boom 2021. You're the nickel. 2022, you're the starter. But when you look at the salary cap, I think looking at the salary cap and some of the stuff and how much money they need to get the rookie class in, I think it's quite possible that the money Cameron Sutton is getting, which is less than a fourth of what Steven Nelson was going to hit on the cap, than what they saved from the cap with Steven Nelson cutting. It was less than a fourth of that money is what Cameron Sutton is on the cap this year. I think the Steelers were like, I hate to go a Ravens, tie in here, but Ozzie Newsome used to say the 80-20 rule. If you can get 80% of the production for 20% of the cost, you do it. And that's what Steven Nelson is. He's around 23% of the cost, and he's probably 85% of the player that Steven Nelson was. So it makes sense there. But now the Steelers need a nickel. They need that nickel cornerback. And it'll be interesting to see because there are some players they are looking at in the draft that are that kind of, you draft them, you put them into nickel, and then you move them outside later. Like that's the kind of players they're looking at. You could see a first or a second round cornerback taken here, put into Mike Hilton's role, and then moved outside eventually. But I also think we have to keep an eye on James Pierre because he is like a poor man's Joe Hayden, in my opinion. And I think he could be a factor in there, at least as the dime back, possibly as the nickel.
A lot to unpack there. The first thing I want to get to was a bit of a buzzword. You said draft. The Steelers cannot draft corners, period. That scares me. Do you think they could turn to the free agent market and just recognize the flaw in their ways, or will they just keep going to the well and hope to change the tides, their cornerback misfortunes?
I actually hope they draft a cornerback. I'm kind of leaning that way now because watching some film, watching some different things, I can't remember his name now. Our defensive guy that he was on the Bengals in Detroit. He was a defense coordinator.
Terrell Austin. How can I always forget his name? Wow.
But he is the guy that solves how we use our defensive backs. And it really became obvious to me when I was looking at film on Miles Killebrew and how the Detroit used their defensive backs under him when they had a whole bunch of trash defensive backs. Like they were 7 or 8 deep at not starters, right? It was like they had 7 Cam Suttons, right? You're not the guy you really want starting, but you can live with it, but you don't want a whole bunch of them. That's not a good thing. And how he would move them around, how he would use them really opened my eyes, and I was like, wow, okay, that's why we started using our defensive backs better in 2019. All of a sudden, bam, everyone looks better because we're using them better. We're finding ways to play them to their strengths, something Keith Butler didn't do well with the secondary. They brought in a guy to do that, so I'd be fine with us drafting a cornerback. We haven't drafted one since he came. James Pierre was our only rookie free agent to make it last year, undrafted free agent, and he looked good in this defense. He did. For the little he played, he looked good. I'd like to see him get another shot. But if the Steelers are like, we could draft this guy, fit him in this role with Terrell Austin here, I think they would do a much better job at matching up a draft pick to the role they're going to have him play in the defense.
Interesting. And you know what? It's unfortunate for a kid if they do draft a corner. I would sit there and be like, he's a bust. They draft him, therefore he's a bust. So exactly. Like I would have a hard time giving someone the benefit of the doubt just based on their history. Kind of like the Patriots drafting a receiver. It's just like, well, he's not very good. Clearly, it's a curse for sure. It is, but like they're meant to be broken. But
well, you think Artie Burns, Justin Lane, they still fit the mold of the Dick LeBeau cornerback. You draft a big, tall, fast guy, and then you hope he figures out how to play. That's what Dick LeBeau always did. And you had Ike Taylor, who did. Ike Taylor figured it out. Pretty much no one else did. Like, you look at Dick LeBeau has like the worst record of drafting those tall, fast cornerbacks of anybody. And we drafted a ton of them. And all of them were not good. So I am looking for, if they do draft a cornerback, I think you'll see more of someone with NFL ready skills more than an athletic profile, because we have a Terrell Austin who can say, hey, if they can do this, this, and this is how we'll use them. Like, right. They do A, B, and C, and we're going to use them in this role. That's more of how he operates, rather than let's draft somebody and hope they turn into like elite corner. And if they don't, then we'll just draft a new person in the second round and hope they turn into an elite corner. So I have a lot more hope in that, but they'd have to show it. They still have to show it.
Yeah, it's just the unfortunate situation for any kid put in that situation. But
yeah,
getting more
all the fans are going to be down on them.
Oh, for sure. And even if they trade it, or even if the best corner in the draft, a J.C. Horn, whoever, Patrick Surtain falls to them in the first round, and the Steelers take him, fans would still be like, well, he sucks.
we just cursed this kid's career.
That's just the way it goes when you miss so many times at the same position. But really, the Steelers had some other news today that was football-related news. They officially brought in their free agent signings, their kind of depth pieces in Miles Killebrew, Joe Haig. Robert Spillane signed his restricted free agent tender today. Exclusive rights. Correct. So that would be like a 1 year, $1 million, I believe, is the numbers for that. So outside of that, Steelers really have been quiet, but today they did free up a little bit more money by redoing the contract of Eric Ebron. That's as far as we know. We don't know if it's void years or if it's a pure extension or what exactly it means, a combination of both. All we know is $3.9 million are back in the Steelers' pockets. What do you think the Steelers kind of do with some of this money? Before they kind of they built up the capital to be able to sign their draft picks and have some money to enter the 2021 season. Now they're starting to line their pockets with some money that they can actually go out and make some moves. Is there a spot in particular you think they might chase?
I honestly, center is still the big one. Center still takes priority to me over even cornerback. I think you can get by because you have Devin Bush, because you still have the front line, and because you have the safeties behind him. You can get away with lesser play at cornerback in depth, right? Nickel and dime cornerback are a coverage by committee kind of role. You're really not just isolated on somebody. It's a very different animal than outside cornerback. And you can skimp there a bit because you're going to have guys behind them. You're going to have Devin Bush in front of them. You can cover for people a bit, but center is somewhere you need somebody. So to me, anything would be center is number one. But I could also see them. Oh gosh, I hope they don't, but I could see them going into the draft with BJ Finney penciled in as their starting center. I really hope that's not the case, but it could happen because the Steelers like to go into the season with some little extra leeway money. They always like to do that.
It'd be really if that's the case. Like we saw, especially me being in the Pacific Northwest, Finney in camp last year was talked about a fair bit because the Seahawks did allocate a fair amount of money to him. They don't really spend a whole lot on their offensive line, and we know Russ's concerns with that Seahawks offensive line. They're very low on it, and he almost immediately lost his starting job, which was just a paved road for him to just basically show up every day, and it was his. Lost it to a guard, and the Seahawks are still looking for a center. They traded him away as a throw-in piece in the Carlos Dunlap deal to another offensive line he also couldn't play in Cincinnati. So if Finney is the starter going into the draft, it almost feels like, to me at that point, you have to reach on a center at 24, because otherwise you're rolling the dice. And if Dickerson and Humphrey aren't there at 55, now you're forced to reach into the third and fourth round guys, and one of those guys is going to have to be your starter. That worries me, and I'm kind of curious if you're feeling the same way on that.
Absolutely. They really cannot afford to go into the draft with BJ Finney as their center. You can't do that. That's not winning football. Now, another thing that some eagle-eyed Steelers fans saw today, and I brought up with Bad before you got on, Jesse James, former Steelers tight end, goes to Detroit. Today, he changes all his profile and photos on his social media accounts to him back in his Steelers gear. And I know all offseason long, that's kind of been from the second he was cut, it kind of seemed like all the media types, all the insiders said, well, Jesse James is probably going to end up back in Pittsburgh. And at this rate, do you kind of just see that move kind of being a formality as we sit here today? It makes sense. I don't know if it'll happen, though. It makes a lot of sense. It really does. So I hope it happens. I would be glad for that. I don't think, as much as I would love, honestly, as much as like Tommy Tremble stands out as someone that I would honestly just love. He's on like my wish list of players for the Steelers to draft. You get him in like a 4th or 5th round. That would be an incredible steal. Great play. But Jesse James would work. Jesse James would work, especially if that's a cheap contract. Yeah, he'd be good back here.
Now, one of the other things I guess we can kind of tie in is the Steelers' plan in general. Me right now kind of looking at the Steelers' combination of offseason moves really doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And I'm kind of curious looking at this team itself as well. Do you see any kind of clear path to what they're trying to do, and potentially if they're kind of showing their hand for the draft, or does it kind of feel like a jumbled mess to you as well?
It really does have that feeling of a jumbled mess. There was someone arguing. I was on the internet, and someone was arguing, saying like, if the Steelers are gonna like the Steelers seem like they're not really willing to admit that this year is going to stink. Like, you brought Ben back. You're kind of like, yeah, this is our last shot. We're all in for one more year, but also we don't have money, And to me, I put this in a Twitter post, but if you're saying, we're trying to win right now, but we can't spend the money to win right now, so we're just going to kind of throw things together. That's what the Pirates did. That's what the Pirates used to do every season, is be like, yeah, whoa, we're trying to win, but also we don't have any money. So we're not going to spend any money, but we're also going to be all in just for this season to try and win everything we can this year with no money. That's what it sounds like to me with the Steelers. That's what it looks like. Yeah. And it's kind of bad. But in all honesty, we've been here before. We've been here a number of times, and then all of a sudden they sign one player and you're like, whoa, hey, that's a pretty good pickup. And okay, that fills a big hole. All right. And then you get through the draft and you're like, whoa, this team could be actually good. For example, 2019, after the 2018 season, we're like, this team is horrible. Like, they're just bad. And then Ben Roethlisberger goes down and they win the same number of games. Like, they still win. They still don't have a losing season. They still have 8 wins. And then because they had a few guys late, they had a good draft, and wow, the team's a totally different team.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, just kind of looking at it, if they sign an Austin Blythe, the center from the Los Angeles Rams, if they brought in, I don't know, Jesse James on top of that and paired it with some other, I don't want to say a running back. That definitely at this point feels like a formality of something they'll do in the draft, especially high. Gosh, say some big time outside linebacker depth. If they paired like 3 moves like that together and then nailed the draft, all of a sudden I could definitely see my confidence level raise as well. Right now, there is a ton of worry though, especially because they're pushing a lot of money into the future, but then haven't done anything to kind of to kind of level that to say, oh, we are a team making a push. Like when you look at the AFC North as well, the Ravens are definitely a team that's taken a step back this year, but I think the Browns are a team that have taken a step forward, and that kind of seems like to be the main competition to try to maintain the AFC North title is going to be up against the Browns. So what do you think of free agency this early part of the new league year across the entire division?
Yeah, the Browns look good. I have to say that, like they have stuff to build on. The question is, can they? You know, that team is trying to rebuild build a new culture, not rebuild it. They've never had it since they came back into the NFL. So yeah, like if they can get that culture going, that's the biggest thing. Can they actually learn to win and be winners? Then they're a real threat. Ravens, man, it's crazy to me that 2 wide receivers have now gone away from the Ravens.
It sounds like more than that.
Yeah, like they're getting offered more money, and they're like, Juju's like, nah, I'm going back to Pittsburgh. T.Y. Hilton's like, I'm going to stick with the Colts, man. That doesn't sound good.
Is that Lamar Jackson or Greg Roman? Is that the offense, or are they saying like, oh, this guy can't throw the ball? It's saying something.
I don't think it's Lamar, because on film, Lamar is not Lamar. Oh, there's so much there. There's so much, and it's so you can't dig into it in the time we have. I don't think it's fully on Lamar, but it is partially. I think there's a lot to that. I think there is a lot to that. There's a lot of wide receivers that leave Baltimore. You don't really stay there. Like that's not a team that does that. So to me, probably they understand it's a 1-year deal, and it's a 1-year deal that's not leading anywhere. That's my bet on the Ravens with wide receivers. But you brought up outside linebackers for the Steelers. Are you forgetting our big signing?
There is that big signing of the day, Cassius Marsh, Mr. Pokemon and Magic the Gathering card shop owner. He made it one good special teams tackle against the Colts.
Yeah.
Was awful against the Browns.
Like to say I called it. He'd be their guy.
Yeah.
I told you they were going to bring him back.
Yeah. I had no problem with that. He brought some juice on special teams. Lord help us if it's any more than special teams.
Yeah, Lord helps if he has to come in for TJ Watt.
Oh,
like
you know what?
Games.
If it wasn't my job to watch these games and like tweet about them and write about them and do podcasts on them, I would turn those games off.
Yeah.
TJ Watt wasn't on the field and Cassius Marsh was.
I would do a film room on Cassius Marsh in that playoff game, but wow, it was bad.
Oh,
it was just ugly. And the Browns really quickly were like, that guy, pick on him. You know,
they didn't even have their coaches on the field, and they knew. It's like, whoa, we're there.
Yeah. That might have helped because the offense court, the guy, like, there's no offense. You're like, what are we doing? You know what? Run it that guy. Just run it that guy. He's
49 is a horrible number. He's clearly like a junior varsity player. Just make-a-wish kid. He's just on the field. Just
gives nothing in run defense. Let's just run the ball right at him.
Goodness gracious. As we're at the top of the clock, though, I did want to talk about running backs with you today. Specifically, what's remaining in free agency, because that it's kind of interesting to me. A lot of these guys are coming off the board now, and really the only ones that are left are Leonard Fournette, I suppose, who kind of seems like a deadlock to stay in Tampa Bay, and some older guys. And then there's James Conner and Le'Veon Bell, who knows at this point what the Steelers' kind of plan is for that position. It does feel like they're going to draft someone, but with all these running back spots kind of starting to fill up across the league, do the Steelers have to panic and take one at 24? Or will one of those top 3 guys be available at 55? Or will they even just sign someone to kind of fill out this backfield?
In my opinion, James Conner's coming back.
I kind of see that too.
Yeah, I think there's literally no market for him.
Yeah.
There's just nothing people understand that he is decent starter when he's healthy.
1B still though, but yeah.
Yeah, he's not the starter you want even when he's healthy, and he's not really healthy. And I doubt he's going to get a better offer than what the Steelers would give him as far as opportunity to play. And even money wise, who's going to pay James Conner to be your, backup? It's not like, he's in a tough spot. I hate it because he was an NFL running back before he got cancer.
Yeah.
Before cancer hit him, he was a stud. He was an absolute stud, and he has never gotten back there. But I'd take him back. We'd still need to draft somebody, but it would certainly take the pressure off. Like if Travis Etienne isn't there, you can say, all right, we'll pick up a bargain guy later with some upside. We can get a Chuba Hubbard, later in the draft. We can do that. We can get somebody. Or for goodness sakes, under Matt Canada's offense, if you remember, again, Steelers were the 9th best rushing team in the NFL through 5 games when Matt Canada had more say in the run game before that all fell apart. If his offense actually works, we might not need that top running back. We might be able to get by with James Conner, with Anthony McFarland, with Benny Snell, with Jalen Samuels. As much as we would all love that, we could survive.
Now, I know we're kind of at the top of the clock here, but just a couple more thoughts on this running back spot. There's some people that have been mentioning me, talking about Adrian Peterson. Now, not to be kind of the bell cow guy, but he was a very good short yardage back in Detroit last year in a system that wasn't all that great. Could you potentially see them pairing a guy like that with the rookie? And basically, if you're signing an Adrian Peterson who played vet minimum last year, who by all means would be doing the same again this year, to me, if you bring a guy like that in, you pretty much just move on from Benny Snell right away. Basically plays the same spot, except one guy's older and does the job better. Like, sorry, but that's just the nature of it. Could you see a move like that, or is that just too un-Steelers-like? But again, Peterson did mention the Steelers a spot he could see himself in.
If you see the Steelers draft somebody like an Etienne who can be a wing back, move around into the slot, play running back, slot receiver, H-back, wing back, can move around and be a playmaker, a guy like Adrian Peterson makes so much sense because he would give you that power on the line to just be like, all right, Adrian, get us 3 yards. Just go up and hit the hole and give us 3 yards. Kind of Adrian Peterson can be a Frank Gore.
Yeah.
He can give you what Frank Gore gives. And that's the perfect kind of compliment when you have a play making like speed guy who can hit you doesn't have to line up in the backfield to hit you for a touchdown. That's the perfect kind of compliment there. At that point, you have like that, Ingram and what's his name? Oh my gosh, another name.
Oh, in Baltimore before, or are you talking Alvin Kamara?
Saints, Alvin Kamara. Like his first year when he was only a part-time running back, like you still had that because you had that power guy. They can give you kind of that dynamic. Not quite on that level, but I think you could get that kind of dynamic out of them.
Awesome. So that pretty much does it for today's show. So Geoffrey, before we get out, is there anything you want to plug for the people?
The film room I did today is a good one. Cameron Sutton filling in for Steven Nelson. It focuses on week 13, which we did lose, but that was more on the offense. The defense actually did pretty good, but it shows exactly where his strengths and weaknesses are and what you can expect, because I believe he is going to be your outside cornerback playing where Steven Nelson did last season. He's going to be doing that this season. So check that out.
Awesome. I'll have probably a couple stories out tomorrow on a number of different topics. I think I'll also dive into something along the lines of looking at just what we finished the show talking about, drafting a running back, and potentially if someone's available, a a little bit later instead of that first round pick, one of those top 3 guys potentially falling. So keep your eyes out for that. Make sure you're also clicking over to BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. Your one-stop shop for all things Pittsburgh Steelers, as deputy co-editor Dave Schofield says so eloquently. Just make sure you're always clicking over to that website for everything when it comes to breaking news. You're going to find it all there at BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, and make sure you're listening to the entire family of podcasts brought to you by said website. So for my co-host, Geoffrey Benedict, thank you for tuning in. My name is Michael Beck. We will catch you guys next